I feel like I've seen enlightenment, and I thought it was going to be about levitating and telekinesis, and it's actually just about an increased awareness of how annoying I am. Last night I get out of the bath and Mark has a TV show queued up and he says to me, this is a show, someone said in the YouTube comments, this is a show made by the guy who made Nathan For You. And I looked at the show and I was like, yeah. And I didn't say it out loud, but I was like, yeah, we watched the first season. And so then it starts and it's the first season and I'm like, we watched this, right? And he said, no, this is a brand new show. And I was like, okay. And the way that we watch TV, unless it's something I am uniquely interested in, which it almost always has to be a documentary or reality TV, this is kind of reality. It's almost the Nathan stuff it's almost too awkward for me. But anyway, so when we watched the first season, I watch TV with I'm on my phone most of the time. And Mark does everything more attentively than I do. So we get 15 minutes into the show and I'm still on my phone, but I'm like, dude, I can tell you what the next line is. I'm like, we definitely have watched this. And he's like, we have not watched this. I've never seen this show before. And then he pulls it up and it's yes, it came out in 2022 and Mark was really into it. And Mark very attentively watched this show. I remember because it came out in the kind of post miscarriage era where
it's 2022 when it came out.
Yeah. So it was, we were hanging out watching a lot of TV in that era at night. We go through phases, the TV hasn't been turned on in months until the last couple nights, but we go through phases where it's kind of heavy, and when it's kind of heavy, there's more TV at night. But anyway, Mark had been smoking weed at that point. And so what I've kind of discovered is that you don't remember any of the television that you watched while high.
Yeah, while blasted high. It's like because I go hard when I get into things. And yeah, at that point I was like the 3 blunt a day kind of usage.
Yeah, you had quit and then you started again right at the beginning of 2022.
Yeah, and I just, every time I start light for like 2 days, and then I'm like 3 blunts in. So it's alarming because as you said it, I knew that there was like, I had heard of the show Rehearsal, and I knew that there was like a new season, but I think when I pulled it up while you were in the bath, I was like, oh, like it's the new Nathan for You kind of thing. So like, cool, we're just gonna start from the beginning. And I saw that there were 2 seasons. I was like, oh, wow, they got like 2 seasons already. And then I don't know, like halfway through that first episode, I was having a little bit of a deja vu. Like, oh, this is weird. But maybe it's because I saw it in the trailer. And, until the 3rd time, you're like, okay, wait, I'm having a little bit of a problem here.
I felt like I was losing it.
I'm losing it. Like, we have seen this. And I didn't watch it by myself. I knew I watched it with you. So, and then I started going like, oh, yeah, maybe. Because this has happened before, like certain movies we've watched where you're like, I kind of have a deja vu in it. I'm like, I kind of feel like I've seen this, but then I try to clock my memory and I'm like, no, I never watched it. I don't know the name of it. It's not ringing a bell. And so, yeah, I have discovered over time, which is very alarming, to be honest, because it's mostly recognized within cultural content we're taking in. So like a movie or something that we definitely watched, and I don't remember a lick of it. And I'm curious how much of my life is like that I experienced when I was high, that is just gone. It's in a black hole, and I really don't have any recollection of it. It's so funny because when you're in the high, when you're smoking, it's like you think you're taking it in, you think you're kind of retaining the memory, but there is something to that thing, Coco was talking about like the REM cycle when you're high, that you don't go into full REM. And I do think that's where we kind of lock in some of those memories, and that they're maybe just not locking in. So you've had an experience all day, you go to sleep, and that's where it kind of locks in and you can recall it, and they're just not locking in properly. So you may experience it deeply when you're high, but it doesn't retain itself. And that's like one of the downfalls, I think, of like heavy usage of a psychedelic like that. It's great for like in the moment, but you don't retain it. So therefore you don't integrate a lot of the things that you're processing, whether it's emotions, experience, or anything. For the moment, it makes a lot of sense. And it makes like deep sense because your boundaries are out and you're seeing everything. And so it's like you feel like you're really, learning from it. But then if you can't remember it or integrate it, what's the fucking point?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's kind of frustrating when it happens like that, when I'm like, dude, we did. Because then I realized, I was like, no, I vaguely remember actually watching the Nathan for You show, and then this came out, and I was like, oh, cool, I like that, let's check this out. And that we did. I don't think we finished it, though. We only maybe watched like 1 or 2 episodes of that season.
Yeah, I really wasn't. I think I got like halfway through the first episode and then was like kind of disinterested. And this was, I think, during an era where I would fall asleep and you would stay up much later than me. And
I lost interest in it too. It's just, yeah, the Nathan for You thing isn't like, I was fascinated with it because of the awkwardness in it. And like sometimes that type of comedy is like hard to sit through. And there's like kind of a pain in it that's interesting to me. But I can't do it long term. And so, but it's alarming to just have.
It's a little too close to home for me.
You
know what I mean?
It's alarming to have that like realization that I'm like, oh my God, I did watch this and I have no access to the memory of it. But it's a vague, like this kind of delusion. It's like a vague memory of a dream or something.
Oh, that's what it was. We did before you started smoking weed again for a month or 2 recently. You hadn't smoked weed in like a year and a half, and we were both in a slump. It was like eclipse season last year. We were both in a slump, and so we decided to watch the OA because it's a great way to like when you get into one of those slumps where nothing feels magic, watch the OA. And so we watched the OA and argued through the whole thing that you were like, I have never seen this. And I'm like, dog, there is a 0% chance that I did not make you sit through both seasons of the OA.
No, and I remember binging it, but I was like, I don't remember this episode.
Any of it, no. So it was like a brand new show for you. And it's not like my brain perfectly stores like TV shows. I think my brain is like, I don't need this information. But while watching it, I am like, okay, I remember this now. Last night, I felt like I was losing it because you were so confident that it had just come out. And I have been having a lot of weird deja vu things that I'm like, but I have definitely experienced this before. And so that finally I was like, just check the date. Like, we fucking watched this. So then we watched like 15 minutes of the second episode or the second season. And the whole premise of this is like he's talking to the safety captain of the Aviation Safety Association or whatever. And they're going through all these plane crashes, which I didn't know we've had that many plane crashes. And going through the logs of what happened, and in all of these situations, and I think this is all real, in all of these situations, it's basically that the co-captain or whatever they're called, co-pilot, is not speaking up when they know that the pilot is fucking up. And that's literally their whole job.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what ended up happening in the show because you turned it off, but it's basically people have people pleased themselves into plane crashes. Like, people would rather die than assert themselves. And I feel like that's such...
Yeah, and because there is, as the guy was saying, there's so much risk. Like, if the co-captain tries to override the captain and say, hey, no, that's wrong, we need to do this, like, the captain has the ability to get that person fired. So there is, like, it's partly, I think, for safety to give the captain, like, final say, as they've had more training and more knowledge and they've gotten into that rank. But it does put pressure on the co-captain that they might not speak up because they're afraid to get fired or they're intimidated, and then you cause a crash. And so it is like the lack of ability to communicate is what causes it, which is
right.
Crazy.
And hierarchy.
And it makes it like, definitely when you see a lot of those crashes were just caused by a simple communication back and forth. It's like, oh God, like, it does make you start to second guess getting on a plane and trusting these people that are just having communication issues, that you're putting your life at the helm of that little simple thing it's pretty wild. Yeah, that show, it just doesn't, I don't know, I couldn't handle it watching it anymore. So we only got the first episode, 20 minutes in.
We've really struggled watching TV now.
Yeah, it's not something, we haven't had it on forever, and I think I've been wanting to just have, like, try to find more documentaries, but I think we've watched all the good documentaries that come out, and it's most of Netflix, all the streaming services, it's just like crime documentary, dark, like, scary shit, and that I'm like, those are interesting sometimes, but yeah, for the most part, it's just a bunch of shit out there. And so I think we tried in the last 2 days, but it was like, I guess there was nothing. We watched one good documentary, but...
Oh, yeah, we watched the documentary about Jerry Falwell Jr.
And the...
Wild. And the pool boy.
Pool boy sexcapade thing. It's really...
Wild
and that
shit.
was an old documentary, too. I think that was like 2022. 23.
Christian nationalists are fucking bonkers. Truly bonkers. All right. So we're leaving town for my dad's surgery this weekend. So this week we are recording this week's episode and next week's episode. So I have a long list of things for us to talk about. And we're just going to split the list in half, I guess. So...
more gossip. Let's talk about some people.
Someone commented, please don't become a gossip podcast.
Yeah, I don't think that was our intention. I was like even cringing on the second episode that we were going to do that was going to be more about it. But I do think there was a lot of interesting things to unpack. And that was productive gossip, I think. But
yeah, we were just
there's
using
no way
them
this
as
is
a
going to
mirror.
become a podcast about like cultural gossip. It's
I'm just,
not going to
yeah,
descend.
I was totally kidding when I said that. I I think it was a great mirror to unpack a lot of things. I do wish that I could have like the idea for alien school that just never worked out, where it's almost like a Tim Dillon-esque, but for the spiritual community, where I just rip on.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of people in the comments going, yes, please do
cultural.
That. Do that.
Yeah, I tried.
You probably should try to do
I tried for years to make that happen. I don't have a producer for it. So I guess I'm not supposed to do it because limitation is an oracle. So I'm surprised we haven't talked about this. Have we talked about cults on this podcast before?
Yeah, I mean, I think in passing here and there.
Okay. Because we're obsessed with cults. Like, we're not obsessed, but we love a cult documentary, a scam documentary. You know, I had the podcast Mormon and the Meth Head. So I learned a lot about cults. A lot of people that follow that podcast were ex-Mormon, but also ex-Jehovah Witness. You know, I dated an ex-Jehovah Witness for a hot minute. I think the New Age movement has lots of little tiny cults, but then it also has a lot of things that I wouldn't call cults. And so I've just realized I think that people define cults as different. Like I feel like some people define it as those people believe something weird that I don't believe, but it's harmless, really. Anyway, so this person said, on the subject of deceiving people without realizing it, have you ever considered that human design may be an MLM cult adjacent organization? Sincerely love you both. Yeah, I feel like now people feel like when they leave a comment, they have to be like, I do like you.
They're going to get blasted.
Anyway, yes, I have considered this, and I have, and they're referencing a book, and they made a really good outline here of why it is cult/MLM adjacent. I also have a lot of feelings about MLMs as I've been in.
What is MLM?
Multi-level marketing.
Oh.
So I've been in lots of those. Like, was that rampant at your church?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were huge at our church too. I realize that that's partially, that's kind of the scam of the Christian thing, is that the pastor gets in on these MLMs early, and then everyone's in his downline. And even if the MLM fizzles, they made a ton of money off of it. Right. So definitely when I was young and I was in a anyway, I'll go back to that. All right. So the overlap between cults and human design. I love a fucking bullet pointed message, by the way. I appreciate this so much. All central info and dogma comes from a single leader. Leader uses the name of a god and claims information was delivered exclusively to him from a divine source. I guess we'll just go through these one at a time. I can't stand it when people call themselves Ra, but I have looked into it, and Ra Uru Huru, or whatever the fuck his name is, it means something, and it's whoever he channeled from told him that it means something like messenger. Ra Uru Hu was the name he took after his mystical experience in 1987 when he claimed to have received the human design system during an 8-day encounter with a voice. Fun fact, he didn't choose the name lightly. This is ChatGPT. He didn't choose the name lightly. He claimed the voice gave it to him, and after the experience, he dedicated the rest of his life to teaching the human design system. He was deeply anti-guru, sarcastic as hell, and didn't want to be worshipped. But he also believed the system was received from a transcendent intelligence and should be studied like a science of mechanics, not a belief system. And Ra Uru Hu means the bringer of light and awakening to humanity. So anyway, as someone who has dealt with someone who believed they were the god Ra, it was helpful for me to find out that was not what he was saying. Still not my favorite thing, but as far as all central info and dogma coming from a single leader, this is why I think he died. Because I do think that leads to cult type stuff. And if he was alive, I believe that human design, this stuff was literally just created for this bridge for us to differentiate, and that it will fizzle out of relevance over the next 100 years. And I think if he was alive for this process of the last 10 years into the next 20 years, it would be near impossible for it not to be orbiting around him, even if he was constantly trying to stop it orbiting around him. The fact that he died before shit popped off gives it more relevance or validity to me.
Yeah, and I think one thing to mention too, I feel like I mean, we kind of touched on this in the last 2 episodes about the Aubrey thing, is the fact that when you're channeling, like he heard a voice in a mystical state and channeled this information down. That voice says, we're the bringer of light and you need to disseminate this information. There's just so much to unpack, like when somebody's claiming that. And the only way to get through it to me is to discern what is true for you in any given moment. And that can shift over time, depending on how much more knowledge you gain about it. But that could be a deceptive energy coming in, trying to make him feel like a guru and, then create a dogmatic system out of this that then would create a cult and then invalidate the information and throw off the New Age movement. There could be a million different reasons why some negative energy would come in. There could be a positive communication coming through from what we would say is like a 6 density social memory complex, trying to bring helpful information into the 3D reality. Then there's also the possibility, which kind of goes hand in hand with the 6th density, is that that's his higher self disseminating information in to help him achieve his mission. That is not built around guru mentality if the person knows how to transmute that information and not create a cult around it. And so like it both could happen. But that's kind of where I land, is that with how he interacted after that and how he was like very sarcastic and brooding and constantly pushing away from the worship thing, it does feel like that was a part of his like soul mission, is to bring that science into the collective for a useful tool in this time. That isn't like the ultimate truth necessarily, but it's a very helpful tool that seems to actually be a combination of already given tools like the I Ching, astrology, numerology, all these things. It combines it into one mechanical system that's like really powerful to utilize all of those within one, instead of having to go search for each one and try to corroborate the information. And so that feels like what makes it trustworthy to me, but still it's like, it's not going to answer everything. And so
right.
It's just a tool. And I would say also though, maybe with the confusion and distortion of it being potentially perceived by certain people that practice it like it came from a god and it's the ultimate source, this is the new Bible. There are dogmatic elements of it from people that are deep within the human design system that have
sure.
like positioned themselves as the ultimate authority of it, and they have to like gatekeep that whole system. And they're very dogmatic about it. Like there's only one way to read this and nothing else. And like this is the entirety of creation, is this mechanism. And so I think that it has become that way for certain people.
But and you don't have to go through those people to get
and that's what, for me, when I started to learn about human design, it was like I kind of went to that straight source first and was turned off by it and dropped it for months to a year. And then slowly came back to it and started playing with it myself and just not listening to the dogmatic stuff. And then realizing, having done more research on the I Ching and using the I Ching and using astrology, a lot more of it made sense just as this like combination of tools that, oh, wow, this is like a more powerful tool. I can just go straight to this instead of going to the I Ching separately and astrology separately.
Just in reference to it coming through one person. So it's a system that is now in computer programs, and before they had computers to do it, it had an ephemeris or whatever that word is, similar to astrology, because it is based on astrology. It's a combination of astrology and I Ching and human genetics. And so one person channeled it, which I do believe that one person can channel something for a time. Like I do absolutely believe that there are humans here in the game and their entire purpose is to bring forth some sort of tool, which I do believe it is a tool for this moment, it would have to be one person channeling it. It's not going to be multiple people channeling it. That's not usually how anything like that works. However, it's not gatekept through this one person. So I'll use Mormonism as an example here because I know quite a bit of it from the podcast. So Joseph Smith was the one who channeled everything that God said, and everything that God told him just so happened to be things that would benefit him at the time. So there was a point where he didn't like people drinking hot beverages for some reason. I can't remember what that was. And so God conveniently told him, like, nobody can drink coffee now. I think someone spilled coffee on his couch or something stupid. At one point he wanted to fuck, the babysitter. So then God told him that he needs to be able to do all these things. There was
Aubrey
never
Marcus.
Yeah. He's like, exactly. God told me something that conveniently benefits me, and you have to listen to me because I'm the only one with the channel to God. And to this day, the Mormon Church does something called General Conference, in which a board of old white men have channeled some new logistics, God's new rules. Once every 6 months, they let everyone know what the new rules are. And the average Mormon does not have access to God to talk to. What this man downloaded was then given as a system that is decentralized. We don't have to go through him, and you don't have to go through Jovian Archive. I don't know why people even fuck with Jovian Archive. Like, you don't have to go through that to get it. It's basically astrology. It's more accessible, more personalized astrology. All of these things that we're talking about are based on astrological transits. That's why it's based on when you're born. It's an astrology that helps you figure out who you are, to decondition and to get ready for the new thing. And I believe that it really, like, he downloaded all this stuff in the 90s, and then he talked about it until he died. And I want to say like 2011, 2012. And then it just had enough roots that it grew decentralized and is here for the perfect moment. In the 2027 conversation people have only been having for the last few years. And I truly believe, like, it may be like a tool like astrology kind of in the background, but when we really get into the Cross of Sleeping Phoenix, it's not going to be about logistical tools like this. It's going to be about vibes. And so it's teaching us how to live on vibes.
It's interesting because doesn't it kind of teeter out at 2027? Like he didn't, we have all the cross the planning, the stuff before it up to the Cross of Sleeping Phoenix, and then it like ends, right? Because he didn't have any more.
There's a couple more things on the one chart, but the thing about 2027 and the Cross of Sleeping Phoenix is the vast majority of this is open for interpretation. There is like not a lot. Form. He did like 2 lectures. There are 2 lectures still in circulation. As Kelsey and I were teaching this 2027 class, a lot of it is our own interpretation because, it's based on the I Ching. And so each gate is a I Ching, you can kind of discern from there, and then it has an astrological assignment, and you can kind of discern from there.
So I guess it can be applied moving forward. Explain the thing real quick you were talking about the other day where it's like how they overlay, like the Vedic and the I Ching, it like interlocks.
Okay, so yeah, this is in the course, and Kelsey probably explains it better than I am, but better than I do. But when we're talking about the shift of the ages is the same thing as the global cycles. So we all know that, like, we're going into the age of Aquarius thing, right? The way that it's set up in human design is that there is like a chart, and that is based on tropical astrology. And tropical astrology is based on the seasons. So it's anchored in by the solstices and the equinoxes. This is why Neil deGrasse Tyson sounds like a dumb fuck when he talks about how astronomy moves and how astrology's fake because it doesn't move. It's not based on where the fucking stars are. It's based on the seasons. And so there isn't a 13th sign in tropical astrology. It's based on seasons.
Right.
It doesn't move. Vedic astrology does move because it is based on the actual stars. And so there is something called the precession of the equinoxes, where due to the tilt of the earth, I think, that shifts over time. So if you take the stationary wheel of tropical astrology and you put the Vedic wheel of astrology over top of that, that moves over time. So the one that's stationary is considered the locks, and the one that moves is considered the keys. So over time, those keys change. And the premise of the game, this is what determines the premise of the game. So the premise of the game shifts as the ages shift. So in 2027, we are fully clicking over into a new 400-year cycle because of the precession of the equinox.
And does the I Ching 64 hexagram goes over that as well?
Yeah,
right?
like in the course, you can see, like she made really good like graphs or whatever, so you can see the cycle and then the gates.
So that's what, just that alone is what makes it such a powerful tool, because it's like essentially like a really advanced clock.
Yeah.
When you overlay the clocks and you see, oh, there's a correlating pattern each time it moves, you get a blueprint of like where we are, where we came from, and where we're going, and the corresponding energies that apply to you individually and the collective. It's so amazing. I mean,
it is so amazing, and it really gives, and it's something I've really like has been highlighted through this course, is that we are going from, we've been in the cross of planning, everything is hyper logical and it's based on like really good mental compartmentalization and putting things in boxes and defining things and getting to the bottom of things. And so that is how we are designed to work. And the Cross of Sleeping Phoenix is like vibes. It doesn't have a narrative. It doesn't have a good logical story. It doesn't have, it doesn't win the argument. It's just what feels right in the moment, what's authentic, what's intimate, because we're both being authentic. And we don't know how to get there without using mental compartmentalization, because that's how we're conditioned. And so what this person like channeled was, here is mental compartmentalizations and things that make sense to your mind that help guide you back to your body. And that's the purpose of it.
Yeah.
And so the reason to me, this one point, and we'll get to the other points, doesn't set off my cult alarm is because he brought forth a system and he gave the system out. And I don't have to go through him to get to the system.
Yeah.
So when, for me, my cult alarms go off is when it is gate kept. Like, and I don't consider Jovian Archive charging for whatever gate kept, and I'll get to that in a second. I'm talking about, I don't have to go to this man, he's dead, and I don't have to go to whoever he left behind in order to get this info. It's in computer programs, and I can never fuck with these people and have access to this information and use it as I see fit.
Yeah.
So the next point is, information is marketed as having the answers to the mysteries of life and the solution to all of life's problems. Not knowing the information is missing out on the truth of reality, triggering FOMO. I don't think it's marketed that way. I think people who engage with it might market it that way. I think there are people who are practitioners of human design that talk that way. And that's just people living in their conditioning. And that's up to us to use our own discernment. But I absolutely have experienced it changing my life and changing other people's lives. And the reason it has changed my life and changed other people's lives is basically what human design does is tell you it's okay that you are the way you are. And here's how to actually lean into that energy. That's all I've really experienced with it. Now, I have seen instances like in comments where people are like, my dad wouldn't leave his house without an invitation. Invitation is about speaking into other people's lives. It's not about living your own life.
Right.
Waiting to respond is about like checking in with yourself to see if you're into something. And so the fact that some people relate to it dogmatically and take things very literally is just, that's how they relate to things in their life, and that's theirs. There is nothing. When I think of a cult, I think of one individual channeling information that usually forces people to do things they don't want to do. I feel like human design largely tells you the way that you're different is okay. That's why it is so liberating for so many people.
Right.
It's okay that you don't have to do things you don't want to do, is basically what it's saying. If you hate this job, your body's not going to work. It's okay for you to do what your sacral wants to do. When I think of cults, and like I said, we've watched a lot of cult documentaries, these cults are often one individual that you have to go through to communicate with God, and that individual is telling you to ignore what your senses are telling you. And I believe the cult of politics is like this,
right?
Where you are expected to toe the line of the leader and give them, make them the authority of your life, even when it doesn't feel right. There is no expectation. Human design's a tool like astrology. Astrology is not a cult. So,
and I think powerful tools can be distorted and manipulated to become cults, and that's probably, there is a lot of people, misinterpreting it and using it subconsciously for something to benefit themselves, and so then you have these certain ideas of human design that are a little bit off-putting because it is kind of dogmatic, and so, but that, like you said, it's like through people's own misunderstandings of it and kind of distorted elements of it, and because a lot of it is, it can be complex and like paradoxical to get through it because our minds are so programmed to think a certain way that you kind of have to work to deprogram your mind as you move through it, so it's like there's always going to be distorted elements being disseminated about it.
And this is where it's very important to be in our power. But so do some people take human design and start their own cults with the human design? Sure. But it is not a centralized thing. And maybe it would have become, and that's why he died. But it is everywhere I've learned human design is like completely decentralized. Half the places I learned it were those people don't even know I was listening to them.
Yeah.
Number 3 is in groups and out groups. All one's close friends are in the group or associated with it. Those who are not in the group, quote unquote, don't understand, and it's difficult to relate to them. This is valid of cults for sure. Real cults don't let you have friends outside, to what I consider to be real cults. And when I think of cults as a dangerous thing, they are what you were talking, like if you leave you're discommunicated from your friend. Like if you leave Jehovah's Witness, you're never allowed to talk to your family again.
Yeah.
Your kids, your parents, your spouse. That's what I think of as like a cult. Like it separates you from everyone. It demands that you stop talking to your family because they're problematic or whatever, That's what I think of cults. And there is a lot of that in politics. You're expected to disown your family, if they hold a different political thing, which is sometimes valid. Like sometimes your family holds such a different perspective than you, there is no way to connect to them. If your family's like hella racist or bigoted or something, it might be difficult to connect with them as human beings because they're not behaving like human beings. But there is also a social pressure,
right?
To do that. And so I'm definitely critical of anything that says you need to stop talking to them when it doesn't feel true to you that you need to stop talking. You need to stop talking to them or else we are going to kick you out of the group. I'm very wary of that. I don't see that in human design. I don't see anyone having to toe a line because it is very decentralized.
I would almost say maybe a point they're bringing up too is actually just a common thread in all like spirituality and awakening is like when you start to go outside the normal way of thinking, like you are kind of abandoned, and then it's hard to relate to people that don't understand what you're going through, and so there's like a disavowing that happens, and you start to isolate and only connect with people that do understand what you're saying,
right? And so
that's just like a common thread throughout all thinking that is like outside the box and not conforming to the collective, and so like that. But I don't think that dictates a cult. It's also it's just like a phenomena of starting to think for your own way and not conform to external authority.
When you experienced this, I guess, when you were going through your awakening of like...
I think a lot of people do.
Yeah, I didn't, but I've watched a lot of people experience this thing where when you start to go through an awakening and you start to have different categories of reason and you start to talk about things differently, the people around you kind of think you're losing it because they don't get it. And not like bad, you're better than them because they don't get it, but they don't get it. And then when you start to find people that do get it, then it's seen as like, oh, they've joined a cult.
Right.
Which I guess makes sense because sometimes that's valid. Like
that's
sometimes
what I'm saying.
people
it's
legit...
a commonality. So it's
Yeah.
like a lot of things can be misunderstood as a cult just through very shallow thinking about like what actually a cult is, what are the negative aspects of a cult, and what differentiates a cult from just other people having like-minded ideas and feeling magnetic with each other instead of repelled with people that have like conflicting ideas.
Yeah, I think this a lot when we watch. What was that cult we watched, or that cult documentary we watched about the dancing cult? It was the strangest thing. They were like TikTok dancers, but then they ended up joining the church. Do you remember that?
They were Mormons?
No, it's pretty recent. They were famous TikTok dancers who then ended up in, I want to say Los Angeles, dancing. They just dance on TikToks, but it's a Christian cult of some sort. And then they stopped talking to their families, and then their families made this whole documentary. And by the end, you're just kind of like,
that. I might have been high as balls.
Yeah. And then we should watch it again. And they say that they're not talking to their family because of something else, And sometimes people just don't resonate with you anymore. I think if someone got really into sports and kept talking to me about sports and kept talking through the lens of sports, I would just be like, yeah, I'm not into sports, so I don't get it. But when you add spirituality to it, then it's a cult. Do you know what I mean? It's like, no, maybe this person's just really fucking into astrology, and so they're seeing everything through the lens of astrology because that's how we work.
I mean, the other thing is like culture. There's so many examples of cults that stem from an original divine spiritual idea. And so like whenever you say spirituality to somebody that's just not on that page, they immediately are triggered like, oh, cult awareness. Oh, you're in a cult, aren't you? And it's like, no, there is a delineation. But I mean, every cult documentary we've watched stem from some spiritual, religious, like dogmatic way of thinking,
right?
That oftentimes has a lot of truths in it that are just being misinterpreted and kind of used as a way to like kind of get their own thing done or have power over others. So I get it. It's like it's a jungle out there within the spiritual world. There are a lot of like cultic behaviors.
Right.
But I think some of it's just a misunderstanding of paradoxical truths.
Yeah. So the in-groups and out-groups one, I'm going to say people would have to use their discernment for that, because I certainly, now that I am in a bubble of people who are conscious, my tolerance for, like my battery, I guess I want to say, for talking to people who are not in this is very small now. I spent decades meeting people where they were at and masking, mostly speaking through the lens of things that aren't the lens through which I see the world. And it's exhausting. And so now that I have a partner and so many friends who are conscious, I mostly just fuck with conscious people, because it's like we all live in we have the same categories of reason, and it's just easier than to like pretend that I have different categories of reason. So this one's tricky because it can be a sign of a cult, but it can also just be a sign of like, I'm not making people feel like shit when they have a different category of reason, but I'm just like not building deep connections with people at this point who don't have the same operating system as me, because it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And so this one's tricky. I don't know that there's an in-group and an out-group of human design, but definitely now that I have a human design as categories of reason, it's a language that I speak. I don't try to make other people feel left out, but I notice that it's a tool that most people that I talk to use in some way. And you can't, you know what I mean? You can't get a half an hour with me without me mentioning the cross of sleeping phoenix. So it just is what it is, the reality I'm living in. Number 4, revenue is generated for the person or company mainly through recruitment via trusted influencers and friends, little official advertising. Strong sign of MLM. This is not accurate at all.
Yeah.
So I've seen a lot of criticisms of Jovian Archive, which is where Ra left his stuff. So I just want to let everyone know, should I drop dead at some point, my Patreon will stay up, and whatever other stuff I have sitting around will go on that Patreon, and that Patreon will be used to support my kids. I don't know what they're doing with Jovian Archive's money, but that's that. So long as capitalism exists, that's just how that's going to work. I think that most of these old thoughts, people, Alan Watts or whatever, those are like things you buy, right? Those are like lectures you buy. It's just the reality of capitalism. I think it's fine. There is no pyramid in human design whatsoever. It is not like, I've been in many multi-level marketing schemes. So multi-level marketing schemes is where I go, here, do you want to be a human design practitioner? I'll sign you up through this centralized thing, and then you sign other people up. That does not exist in human design whatsoever. You can do human design readings professionally without ever being certified. There is no regulation or certification process for that whatsoever. People teaching human design usually have taken a learn your design. Like, there's expectations for what you should know, but there's zero regulation around that. And there's no certifying body, and there is no top-down thing whatsoever. It's completely decentralized. I do agree that that is a red flag, but there is no centralized revenue. If you want to pay money to Ra's estate that is through Jovian Archive, you don't have to go through them. There was criticism for a long time because they had everything behind a paywall for a long time. Most of that shit is not behind a paywall now. It's on YouTube. That seemed very obviously by design for the purpose of not putting that information out there before people were ready for it.
Yeah, totally.
And as someone who hid behind a paywall for a couple of years while everyone was not ready to have the conversations that I thought we should have, that's fair. So the vast majority of the things that cost money on Jovian Archive are now free on YouTube. And so I think it was probably set up to slowly be put out as we got closer to 2027. But until we were already in it, people weren't ready to have those conversations anyway. Also, all these things, you can just find free PDFs. Like, everything is free on the internet. You just got to put a little effort forth. Number 5, being in the group often leads to buying the books and selling the courses that lead other people to buy the books and sell the courses. Jovian makes a lot of money from this without spending a dime. People are free biological advertisements and very devoted.
There are no very good books, to be honest. I've searched. Maybe there are now, but I don't know. I mean, I bought a couple books early on from like Jovian Archive, and they just were the very minimum basics.
The books all suck. I'll tell you, have all of them. They're just printed raw lectures, and there's I can't believe how many of the books I've purchased trying to get additional information, and it's the same information.
Same shit as online.
So there's 3 books total for human design, if you want to get deep into it, that are maybe worth it. But literally ChatGPT, ChatGPT will give you a lot of, it fucks the numbers up quite a bit. So that's a valid criticism of the business of Jovian Archive, is they definitely, in my opinion, have made a lot of books that didn't need to be made, that are regurgitations of other books that are bullshit. That's a valid criticism of their capitalist thing. I don't think that makes them a cult. As far as human design courses and stuff, it's, we live in a world where you have to pay your bills. And so if you're going to dedicate your time to something, it's a transfer of money. And so people also do this with astrology. They also do this with numerology. Yeah. Like, all these systems, you take time to learn the systems, which you do not need the books for. You take time to learn the systems, And then you teach other people to learn the systems. That's no different than going to college to learn a trade that someone who did the trade is teaching you the trade. Like that's not that different. It's definitely not cult behavior. It just is I think probably very temporary assimilation and distribution of information. So I agree. The books piece specifically, and kind of the way that Jovian runs that business altogether, I'm not a fan of, but you can completely educate yourself in human design and use it as a tool, and even do readings professionally or teach courses without ever fucking with Jovian.
Yeah, and without paying a dime. Like, I mean,
Right.
That's the crazy thing about the internet right now. I think part of this too is we've been programmed to think, well, if I want to become a professional in this, I need to go take a course, or I need to buy all the books and study. And that's like true if you want to take that route. But like with the way the internet is now and the way that everybody's sharing their insights and information and free PDFs, you have to dig for it. It takes a little work. But I feel like there is like anything you can get educated on nowadays for no money, zero money.
Right.
And so I understand people that are frustrated, that are trying to heal themselves and get out of debt and try to find abundance, that they keep hitting walls of like, well, I have no money and you're really good, but you're charging $400 I can't afford it. So, you're gatekeeping. This is a cult. And it's like, just go find the information somewhere else.
Yeah.
You know, there's so much. And sometimes it's like overwhelming with how much there is. It does take discernment and like looking for the right knowledge that resonates, because there's a lot of fake shit. But, the barrier to entry right now to like understand any of this, to like learn how to heal is so low. Like, you don't have to have money. It like, again, it takes work to sift through the internet, but it's out there. Like, everything is there.
And it might not be for you, you know. It's definitely a special interest of mine in this moment. It's a special interest of mine in this moment because it perfectly overlays my already existing belief system. And so that's why it works for me, is because everything that I believe has to pass the litmus test of, does this line up with what the alien said? So if it doesn't line up with what the alien said I tend to reject it. If it does line up, it can line up with what the alien says. I use it as like a better way to define what the alien said. So the reason that when I say what the alien says, it's like I spent years in dreams with them showing me things, many of which I didn't have categories of reason for because I was 22 and hadn't had a lot of life experience yet. And so over the past 25 years, I have like gotten more categories of reason for things that I'm like, oh, this is what this meant. And I couldn't even like define that because I was still putting everything in the good and evil box, or I didn't understand timelines and I didn't understand this. And so all of the things that I've learned in the last 25 years have served the purpose of expanding my categories of reason so that I can really understand what I was shown. And they had to show it to me in kind of dumb terms because I was dead asleep when this happened. And so, they explained it in the video game metaphor, and then they explained that we were going from one video game to another video game, and they explained that the game had parameters because I didn't even understand what constructs meant at the time. But then as constructs started to be discussed, I was like, oh, that's what they meant by parameters of the game. And I, for a long time, was approaching it as like, this is a good game and the other game's a bad game. And it took me a long time to mature out of that. And so what the Cross of Sleeping Phoenix showed me is like, oh, here is I just keep describing it as like a left-brained, bullet-pointed list of the constructs for the right brain downloads and dreams and stuff that I saw from the alien. So now I have a way to articulate it. It was kind of the same thing when I read the book Robes. I've never known how to describe the things in the dreams that looked quote unquote bad as actually heavily beneficial for us. And the reason that I couldn't describe that is because I was still hyper materialist. And so I didn't know how to describe that in the dreams, everything looked broken down and collapsed for a long time, but we were happier than we had ever been, and we were more magical than we had ever been, because I was still deeply conditioned that if you're magical, then everything in the material is going to look beautiful and amazing.
Right.
And I was still deeply conditioned in this idea of centralized society. I was still thinking from a society perspective. I didn't understand, oh, it's an individual thing. So the cross of Sleeping Phoenix versus the cross of planning gave me tangible constructs. It gave me logical boxes to put things in to help articulate what I've known for 25 years and have been trying to articulate. And through the soberish experience, I realized that the things that I was saying I wasn't communicating them in a way that people were understanding it, because what I was saying was still getting put through these old categories of reason. So for me, human design has given me something tangible to use to help people do the thing that I was already doing, which is trying to help people realize that like your natural way of being is what is correct for you, which is the major, like, I'm really having a hard time talking today. That is the point of human design, is to learn how to be yourself. That's it. And to be okay being yourself. And the way that we're trained and conditioned to homogenize through consensus reality, most people don't know that. And so the vast majority of my sessions using human design is like, hey, here's a chart that proves that as a projector, you don't have as much energy as everyone else, and you're not obligated to operate with that much energy. Here's a chart that proves, because we are still very materially minded, it's helpful to have that material logical system that says it goes better for you when you wait for the invitation. Because every single projector I've ever talked to has had the experience of offering up advice and having it feel fucking horrible and having it go horribly wrong. Most projectors feel relief when you tell them that if you just wait for the invitations will come. Most generators and manifesting generators feel a relief when you tell them that you don't have to do things you don't want to do. You can just do things that light you up, and then you will have energy for days. Because I had so much shame about the fact that I know I'm very capable because I've seen myself be capable, but then there's this giant list of things that I never complete because I can't make myself do it. I thought I was an idiot in school because I couldn't ever get the assignments done or do the tests. And it's like, yeah, because my sacral didn't want to do it. My sacral thinks it's stupid. I'm not stupid, you know? So for me, human design is just a perfect accessory to my already existing belief system. And I do evangelize it because most people who have worked with it have found themselves. And I think that the cool thing about human design is it will get to a point where we won't need it, which is very different than cults.
Right.
You know, if human design does its trick, we will be 10, 15 years into the cross of Sleeping Phoenix, not needing any of these systems because we are operating so perfectly in trust with our own energy.
Yeah, exactly.
And so for me, a good teacher is a teacher that will make themselves obsolete. Like they've done their job so well, you don't need them anymore. And so that's, as a system for me, and we just talked about this in the course last night. We just finished all of the constructs, and I kind of got choked up at the end because it became really obvious to me that human design is a system that helps us cross this bridge and then will basically render itself irrelevant because the system is designed to teach you to trust yourself in a way that you don't need a system anymore.
Yeah, that's what's so great about it. The liberating aspect of it is like when you just play with it for a little bit, it starts to like uncover those authentic parts of yourself and gives you a way to understand it, embody it, and then at the same time, like decondition the ways you think you were supposed to be that were conditioned by homogenized reality.
Yeah.
And that like is so helpful on any kind of like healing seeking path, is like giving containers of reason, all of that, like ways to understand these more like abstract ways that people have been talking about it forever in, spiritual kind of metaphor and paradox. Yeah, it's such a liberating tool. And I like that it is like any tool. It's like, it's an art form to learn how to use it and to teach it even. It's like, there's so much room for your own interpretation on the way it works, which is why I've enjoyed doing the little that I have of like helping projectors figure it out, is because it's through my own experience. I've picked up little tricks that I didn't learn from a book. I just intuitively started to figure it out. And I was like, oh, this is really useful. Like, I'm going to share this, my own kind of artistic interpretation of using the tools,
Yeah. I have feelings about, like I said, politics, and also 12-step had some cult vibes. I think anywhere where the group, where you're going to get ousted out of the group if you start to have a differentiated experience. And so I've definitely seen there's like a cool kids club of human design on Instagram or whatever. And I find, while I love some of their information, I find their personalities to be pretty dogmatic and pretty hierarchical.
Yeah, that's right.
So I just don't engage with them. Like, I read their content or whatever, but I wouldn't go to their classes or join their communities. I'm not really a community joiner anyway, but it's why I really enjoy Kelsey, who I've taught this class with. That's my go-to human design person, because she is very, she's very serious about the differentiation and the respect of the individual, where some other people that teach human design, you just tell they still have hierarchical conditioning. They're using this platform as a way to kind of feed their ego, and they are kind of dogmatic. And so
I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, it's like 5-10 people, and they're all kind of part of a thing. And so I just don't fuck with, my intuition tells me there's some shadows there that they're not aware of. And so I just wouldn't mess with that. And so that's the kind of stuff in not everyone selling a course is trying to get you into a cult, but they kind of will tell you, kind of will tell you. And this is why I just don't, it kind of gives me the ick when people bring like old school marketing into consciousness things, is because it just doesn't feel good to me to be like, you're never going to survive if you don't have this. I'm definitely not of the belief that you need human design to give you the answers of the universe or whatever. Does it make deconditioning easier? Yeah. Was I already deconditioning before I found it? Yes. A lot of the stuff would have been helpful to know 10 years earlier, but I had already kind of done that deconditioning. So I just think it gives the mind something to do, but you're probably going to decondition anyway. But it is decentralized, and I am extremely sensitive to things that are centralized and gatekept, and it's not at all.
Yeah.
It just is not at all. You don't have to go through any one, and you can absolutely do, if you don't like Jovian Archive, you can absolutely do it without their involvement. I'll try to remember the name of the 3 books that are actually decent, but all of it's available on the internet.
The apps are really great too. That's where I learned most of the stuff, is like deep diving using the apps and like putting my chart in, putting my friend's chart in, my kids, and then just digging through that, which, I mean, some of those, the Neutrino app is like dense as hell. It's like got so much information.
That's so dense. You can go to myhumandesign.com, get your chart for free. That's just some influencer made that. And then you just go through and Google each thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, what's a 2-5 in human design? And then just research it in articles. That's how I learn most things. Or I just follow a bunch of human design people and just learn from infographics.
Yeah.
Was how I learned initially. Then I started deep diving with ChatGPT, which you do have to check a lot of ChatGPT's work, I find, specifically on numbers, anything to do with numbers. But then, Gene Keys. There's also a PDF of that book.
Yeah, the
on
Gene
the internet.
Keys stuff is good. Those books are great.
Yeah. Anything Richard Rudd does is good.
Yeah.
But most of those raw books are just printed, not even edited half the time. There's like the Rave I Ching is good and very helpful to have. It just takes you through each gate and the I Ching version of it. Other than that, you don't need any of those books.
Yeah.
So back to the other thing I've been thinking about is I think we're already in fourth density. I think we've maybe been in fourth density for years now.
Yeah. We were talking about this the other night in the hot tub where I've like, obviously there was like there's like a lot of shift and change that's happened in the last 5 years where many times we've talked about like, well, we're in a different reality. Reality feels like spaceship-y and then sometimes it doesn't. And, I mean, it's similar to with the human design stuff that's like talks about the cross of planning moving into the cross of sleeping phoenix. It's not like a click.
Right.
It's like maybe there is like a date where it does click, but we don't experience that necessarily. It's very subtle. And so as that is getting closer, we start to like pick up the changes and start to adjust. And like, how long does that, transition happen? I think with most of the reality, it would like jar people too much if there was just like all of a sudden things changed. And so I feel like it's the same thing with the idea of going from a third density reality to a fourth density reality. It's not going to just be like they say in the Bible where it's like a rapture and then all of a sudden we're all light beings. I think it would be very difficult to adjust to that. It would kind of create chaos and so many different things. So it would be this slow wave. It would be something where we would start to experience changes. And I think that's why a lot of people are starting to wake up rapidly, because we're kind of getting an intuitive feeling to start to adjust our perception.
Now, is there a hard boundary between third density and fourth density, or is it a gradient?
No, that's what I'm saying. It's a gradient.
Okay.
And everything that the C's have said, it is like you won't, a lot of people will not know that it has happened.
Yeah.
And to recognize it is you'd have to be really sensitive and be able to discern and understand kind of what fourth density is, have a general idea of it and like where to look for signs of it.
Yeah. So I think it could have even started in 2017. I mean, to be honest, I remember the end of 2012, Ascension stuff kicked up. And for a while in that time, I had like a private Facebook group called Ascension 2012 or something, with just like a very small group of people. Then 2012 ended, like whatever, December 21st, 2012. And then I remember in like 2013, things got increasingly more supernatural. And I gained more powers, or however you want to word that. And then in 2014, I remember looking back and going, oh yeah, like 2013, definitely everything changed. But when it's changing, you kind of don't notice. Mm-hmm. Or there will be like changes in the physical reality, like what happened in 2020. I think that it's just easy to project those changes onto the pandemic. But in early 2017, things drastically shifted. And that's also when Trump took office. And so I think that maybe for people who are like caught up in that politics stuff, they attributed it to Trump. But I've thought politics was theater since 9/11. So I wasn't into all that. In my own personal life, things got dramatically dreamier. And through 2017, I just kept saying, like, I'm having a weird year. And then 2018 got even dreamier. And then 2019 got even dreamier. And when I'm saying dreamier, it's like surreal and kind of manic. And I never quite feel grounded. It almost feels like I'm high most of the time. And even when it's the lowest, most depressed day, I still feel like I'm floating a little bit. And so the awakening kicked up. People started going through awakenings all around me. And then when I started soberish and started like finding a lot of people started following me who had been going through awakenings, and I was doing sessions with them. Back then, it was most of those people started going through an awakening in 2017. Then in 2020 before the pandemic was already fucking weird. It was already spaceshipy, and like we call it spaceshipy when it feels like things are floating in the atmosphere. There were jokes about how January was like the longest month ever. Like, is there more months in 2020 or just January? Yeah. January felt it felt like the way that eclipses feel, where everything feels surreal and like you're floating. It felt like that for the entire month. We met that month. And then February was also very weird. And then once the pandemic hit, everybody was knocked so far out of their routine that there was no way to really know that things are sustaining very strange. I think it happened in there. I think it happened in...
Well, it's interesting because I've been trying to think about it a lot and like reading through different transcripts of the Seas that like talking about this. And they were talking about it all the way back in like 95, 96 or something. Through certain questions that they were asking, there were always these like cryptic answers of like, yeah, the wave is coming. They would give sometimes like a general idea of when, like the timing of it. It was all predicated on like, we all have free will. So the exact date is hard to nail down even for the Seas, but they can give a general window, and the window would like change through a couple of the years. But I think the last like general one that they were discussing it before the wave had actually kicked up, I think it was in 96 or 97. And they said within a 14-year window, it should happen right around there is when it will like begin, and you will start to see visually and like understand that something is changing. And so that puts it around 2012. And so I think combining that with the Mayan stuff that was all like lure around there, that, you know, everybody was, I think, you know, we all were misinterpreting that legend of like, it's the end of the world, it's going to all be over, comet's going to come, is strictly physical understanding of it. And so I think maybe the Mayans were onto something, that they were like seeing a certain alignment that correlates to this density getting an upgrade and like transitioning. And so, yes, the end of a world as we know it, the beginning of a new one. There is no physical destruction, but there's an energetic shift that is beginning. And again, I think it's like this gradient. So it feels like maybe that's where it started. It was around there, but then like with any wave, like in the ocean, you know, water starts to pull out. And then as it starts to like come up and the wave is cresting, we start to get a lot more adjustments in reality. So 2017 was a real big benchmark of like, okay, now a lot of things are kicking in.
Right. And that's when you started going through an awakening.
Yeah. And it was like not a chosen thing, really. It started happening to me. And I was scrambling, trying to figure out what the fuck is wrong with me. I think that's what a lot of people describe, like what happened to them in their awakening as well. But then, you know, everything since then, it's like everything has started to kick up. I mean, I would say even since 2012, just with a lot of the technological advancement and things that have occurred all over the world, it's been ramping up. And so you get to certain benchmarks that like a huge thing happens, for reasons we probably don't understand. But I would say 2020, the pandemic was a combination of things. It was in some ways like clearing off people that are not set up to go to that frequency right now. And so that's why we saw a lot of deaths. It's to confuse the reality and to kind of dismantle some of the control systems. So like having everybody pause and not have to go to their jobs.
Not identify with their jobs, see what it would be like if they weren't running around like a chicken with their head cut off.
Readjust their realities, realizing they're in a relationship they don't want to be in. Like so many things that were, positive but difficult and painful. And then, the way AI has been ramping up through all of that as well, whether that's a positive or negative thing, I don't think it's necessarily one or the other. But it's a technological advancement that is like a sign of a fourth density reality. It's some kind of tech that is almost outside of our understanding, which is why everybody's freaking out. And some are saying it's a liberating thing. Some are saying it's the death of us. It's kind of both. And so I think that's where we're going to start to see a lot of paradoxical things. Trump is very polarizing. He's very paradoxical. A lot of the moves that like the tech companies and politics are making are like extremely hard to understand because they're paradoxical. And so I think that, it very much feels like we are in it. And the other thing that like is interesting about the C's I think they say it's like fourth density is going to be either because I think it does like that density has the opportunity to exist outside of time, depending on each individual of how much you are anchored within a 3D understanding and how much, when something happens, you try to make sense of it through a scientific, materialistic understanding. You're only going to be able to perceive at so much of it. But it's a 1,000-year period, I think, that like we experience. If you had to put a linear time on it, that's what it would be. In fourth density, it's either that or the transition is 1,000 years. I can't remember. But again, it's hard to conceive because like in fourth density, there's the potential of not being anchored via linear time. And then, so they kind of confirm it's not going to be a click, something happened, and then we're all light beings shooting energy out of our hands. But they do talk about like the playing field will be leveled as far as the deception and the manipulation of beings that are in power and in control and have been kind of corralling people, that no longer will be a weapon that will be able to be used on people that have discernment and can eject themselves from that. But just like I would say like in 3D reality, in the times that we've been alive, there have been beings that are highly advanced spiritually and psychologically that they could, like light fire with their hands. Like I've seen, there's a lot of these like Qigong masters that have been known to be able to levitate. And I've seen there's videos online that like are kind of going around. It was like hard to find at one point, but this guy that is healing people with chi energy, and then he also displayed like lighting a fire with his hand, and it's so real looking. And then there's other videos that are going around that I can't tell are fake or not. A lot of people think they're fake, but random like civilians doing stuff with like being able to control wind and stuff that's like hard to discern if it's real or AI, but looks like someone that has kind of stumbled upon an ability that they have that like is very advanced. And so within 3D reality, there have been certain beings that are highly advanced that can display what we would say is magic, but is actually just normal fourth density interactions and experiences to be had. And so as we move into fourth density, there will be certain beings that like are the equivalent of like highly advanced already that can completely exist in a non-physical space. So they can completely move into like ethereal realm, because they say fourth density is variable physicality. So depending on how much you are anchored in your thought and like understanding and experience, if you're using 3D structures to understand that, it's going to be very difficult for you to kind of move into a non-physical state. But there will be beings that can, that just like we've had advanced Qigong masters that can light fire with their hands. But the average person that like is going into 3D, it take a lot of deconditioning and like learning how to think with the mind, not in a 3D manner, to start to understand the fluidity.
So you could be in 4D and still experiencing 3D because you're applying 3D. Okay. That's what I think we've been doing.
Yeah.
I think we keep talking about when we get to Fort, like it's somewhere else. And I think what just clicked for me in the last week is like, oh no, this is it.
It's here. Yeah.
And we're getting hit with all these geomagnetic storms and all this solar stuff and all the Schumann resonance and stuff. Like we've been getting blasted for, I would say between 2012 and 2017, it was sputtering. It was changing for sure because things were getting more supernatural for me. That's kind of when I learned to manifest and stuff. Like my consciousness was increasing, but the gas pedal was punched in 2017 and again in 2020. And then I think again this year. But reality has not felt real or solid since 2020. And I just spent years grieving the like 2019 on. I mean, we talked about that a little bit on this podcast, but when 2020 was happening, it was like I got Lyme disease and there's all this shit was going on. We had like, we just gotten together. There was all kind of stuff around that or whatever. So I was kind of swept up in drama, really, and like difficulty. And then 2021, we spent time trying to go back. Like after I got better, we spent time trying to go back to things. And that felt very surreal. Like you were back in the band and they were at the house for the summer. And that was it felt like
trying to plug into a timeline that doesn't
work. That doesn't exist. It was so strange. It felt like trying to run in a dream, And then I got pregnant, so I was like bedridden for the rest of it. And then, so then by 2022, I spent a couple years really privately, I think, not obsessed, but grieving, I guess, the old world. And even all the way up until just doing the stand-up thing. When I think of my life and reality pre-2020, it's like loud, dishes clanking, people like you're at a party and the colors are different. And then 2020, it was something else. And pre-pandemic, just the eclipse in 2020 is when everything shifted around like the 10th. And I have talked about not being able to go back, but I guess I didn't realize that's probably 3D that I'm.
And the importance of grieving it is letting it die, letting it go, and not having it be something that is anchoring you in it, right? So letting it go, and you do process it, and you kind of have to realize I can never go back there, and it's sad. But then when you let that part of you kind of die, then you have more ability to kind of open up into a new reality, and that's what I think is going to be really difficult and individual for everybody. Is if it's already here and it's beginning. Essentially what that means, and this is what gives me butterflies, and I'm always so excited, and I immediately want to go start meditating and try to work on myself, is that if it's here, there's no reason to believe that you can't let's just make it childish and fantastical, but that you can't just start levitating right now,
right?
Or you can't start really having a psychic awareness. Seeing ethereal beings and being able to talk to them and not have to be on psychedelics to do it. Being able to modulate your body, your health, to be able to be like free of disease and heal anything via your ability to like resonate in a different reality that is not strictly 3D. So it's kind of like a little bit of magical thinking, but also very real. Like, can your mind actually believe and take on that, like, you don't have cancer right now and modulate it out of you? You know, those kind of things that we've always been like, that's fantastical thinking, that's dangerous to think like that. No, I think we're in a place now where it's like, if you have the capacity to deprogram yourself and really like start to exist in a timeless space, which I would say is what we feel often, is that when you stop needing to look at the clock and you can kind of live in a space where you're not having to adhere to any time. There are days where I'm just like on a loop every day. I wake up and I'm like, I'm just in a present state, really. Like,
yeah.
There's not.
Which is very Cross of Sleeping Phoenix constructs. There is no linear time in the constructs the way that was in the Cross of Planning.
And this is something that I uncovered that like maybe it doesn't perfectly check out, but I am feeling to be more and more real, is that the Cross of Sleeping Phoenix is 4D.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not always that way, the way that those like locks match up. It's not always going to be at a transition of a phase, but there is a grand cycle that's occurring where a lot of these things are syncing up. And so everything that I've read about the Cross of Sleeping Phoenix like checks out as like a 4 density reality.
Yeah.
The fear of the unknown. It's like, that's what 4D is. It's a space where you have the potential, depending on how much you are out of 3D thinking, to manifest your reality. But that comes with kind of like an unknown. If you're the first time you're doing it, it's like you're used to moving this cup with my hand physically, and then I can see the cup is over there. If I need to drive to the store, I have to get in the car and go drive over there. I know the outcome of things, basically, you know? And so, but when you get into a state where you can, with your mind, like modulate the reality, it's going to feel like there's an unknown, right? You know what I'm saying? It's like this weird blank space because we haven't experienced that kind of reality. And so I think that that's why it doesn't click in, because it's fucking radical. It's like you essentially can choose to be physical or not, but you have to be able to like understand what it feels like to not be physical and know how to modulate that. So it's like there's a huge learning curve that I think we're all in the perfect spot. If you're alive right now, like you're on the path. And it's just, to me, it has really amplified the importance of all of this stuff that's like kind of abstract, knowing yourself, deconditioning, shadow work, being able to control your mind and your emotions and separate them, not only operating from animalistic desires. All of these things are tools to start to learn how to be in a different reality.
Yeah, and it's because my understanding is 4th density is manifestation happens so much faster. So operating out of biases before, not biases, like limiting beliefs or stories, like you're just going to rapid fire recreate those loops. Yeah.
And so that's why the STS, STO like decision is like interesting, because it like whatever one you're like, there's a lot of emphasis on like right now you have to choose. And it's like kind of difficult to hear that sometimes. It's like, well, I don't know though. I don't even know who I am. But I think it's because we're going to, as we move further and further through this wave, however you're aligned is like going to amplify. It's going to become very fast and like much more difficult to reverse back into a state of 3D thinking where manifestation is so slow. You can kind of do assessments on yourself and plan and kind of like realign. Like the further down we get on this, it's like if you're out of alignment, you're going to get like jolted out of it, you know? I think that's, the 4D reality, like the more I understand about it, it's what we would say is like really magical, a magical world, but it also still is free will, and it's decision. It's like the decisions you're making are kind of building that world. And it's all about like this frequency vibration of like how you, whatever knowledge and understanding you get with the mind by being able to harmonize that with your action. And so they are one and the same. It's not just like, oh, I understand everything and I know it all, but still my life is like not abundant. I still have relationships I don't speak my truth in. I still am like in this mess of a 3D world, but I understand all this stuff. And so like really being able to harmonize those is when I think we start to experience 4D reality in a day-to-day basis. That again is going to be like a process of uncovering. And I think it does get quicker and quicker though.
Yeah.
As the wave becomes more and more, which is also why I think like we do have to experience or witness a cleansing of the reality. There are going to be a lot of people that like don't make it through, and that's not good or bad. It's just like they're not in the proper frequency. So as it speeds up, if you're not making these like benchmarks, like then something happens and you move into a different reality, which is just where your frequency vibration is. And so
there's just some souls that want to stay in 3D.
Yeah, and that's a free will decision. But the C's always say, because it's so easy they're speaking in metaphor and like having to kind of dumb down these really paradoxical ideas into linear language. And so many times, Laura and the people that are like asking questions and transcribing, it's very easy to translate it into physicality. And they always say that's strictly 3D thinking. Can you start thinking about this differently? Open up a little bit. And so a lot of the prophecies that they give will be translated into, okay, there's comets coming and it's going to crush everything. And I think that's a bad example because there still might be, it seems like in the past, every transition of densities like this that have happened in these grand cycles, there is a comet kind of thing.
Okay. One thing that Ross said in one of the lectures about the Cross of Sleeping Phoenix is that it is the sleeping phoenix, and that there is a hint in that because the sleeping phoenix wakes up and then catches on fire and then rises from the ashes. And so people assume that we will immediately rise from the ashes when the Cross of Sleeping Phoenix starts, but the sleeping is actually a hint. And when I think of a comet, I think of fire, right? So that's interesting. So if the cycle is we wake up, then, metaphorically die, maybe physically die, I don't know. And then the consciousness rises from the ashes.
Yeah. And I think that there's so many metaphors in the stuff that like, the instinct is to try to translate it in the physical world, but the C's are constantly saying it's like, that's not, we're trying to explain to you in your language what's going to happen, but think very openly about this. And so there's like the wave coming or comets, or like they've said certain times, like California is going to fall off the face of the earth or something, like fall off. I forget what it is, and then they go back and forth. They're like, oh, okay, so the earthquake, it's going to take it all off. And they're like, maybe. But their emphasis is always on, it matters what your frequency vibration is. It matters who you are and like what you're doing, not where you are and like how advanced you are or whatever. So it's always back to this, everything is like a metaphor for energy. So the wave is not a wave of comets or like a water wave. Like there's going to be an iceberg and climate change is going to create like tsunamis everywhere. Even if we go back to the flood in the Bible, like I think if you look at that as a metaphor for energy changing, there's like a whole different way to understand that.
Yeah, totally.
That myth. And I think that's what's going on here. And that also explains why it isn't always an obvious change. It's very subtle and like you don't necessarily notice it if you're not looking for it in energy and you're not, doing this inner work and adjusting your own frequency. And so to me, it seems like through other like information I've gathered that I've many times thought that like, okay, to get to the transition, actually we're all going to die. But then when you go through that death portal, it depends on if you can navigate yourself, then you'll navigate yourself into a fourth density reality and you'll just, like a dream, you'll just pop into that scene. Right. But then the more I understand about like certain cycles that happen, also there are natural big cycles that like the weather or comets, cosmic kind of weather patterns like are enacting. So like the giant machine is always kind of switching the game. But while beings existing within free will are on those trajectories, on those planes of existence, if they all start to oscillate and like open up and wake up, not everybody has to go through a cataclysm and die and like start over or be at the whims of the death portal and like figuring out where to go. That if enough people start to wake up, when some kind of grand cycle cataclysm comes through, if you're in the right frequency vibration, it doesn't matter where you are. If there's a cataclysm, it does not affect you because you oscillate into that reality.
You're not in the physical.
You're not in the physical. And so that's the challenge here is like not understanding a lot of this as a physical interpretation. It's just energetic. And there is something to like when enough people get into that frequency where they are oscillating in the fourth density frequency, then that group of people can move into it. People that are not in that frequency will almost experience them disappearing or dying. The people that do more into fourth density move outside of time and witness the other people actually dying from a cataclysm. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and that makes me think of the Mayans, where like the Mayans are a culture that in our historical records, we don't know what happened. Like they just all disappeared all of a sudden. And they've never been able to figure out and make sense of why that happened. Understanding this kind of phenomenon, it makes me think that they all were onto something and oscillated up in their frequency and moved into fourth density, all at the same, in a blink of an eye. The people that were still in 3D, if they were there, they just all disappeared all of a sudden. And there was no explanation to understand that because they're just thinking 3D. For them, they just moved into a different frequency and could still see the others, but didn't, there was, you know what I'm saying? So
yeah. I remember the aliens saying that there are people operating in 8D that are like right here in this room, but we can't see them. They can see us.
And that's, I think that's with the, if 4D is going on right now, this would also kind of give an explanation to why we're seeing so many UFO phenomena, is that stuff was always going on, but we were in a strictly 3D thinking, you actually couldn't see it.
Yeah, that's what the alien said. The reason that you can't get a good picture of them is because they're actually hopping in between. They're not even meant to be perceived, but they're being perceived because they're just kind of oscillating between the frequency of third and fourth, we'll say density for this.
And so, but then the caveat with that is what's interesting is that there seems to be an understanding from certain, let's say, elite beings or fourth density negative beings that these grand cycles come and they can't do anything about that. All they can do is manipulate people and play within the game.
Right.
And so that they would at the same time know that, okay, a lot of these people are going to start resonating and into a higher frequency. They're going to see these other non-human intelligences moving around and they're going to start to figure things out. So there's alternate timelines where they've been able to crack some of that technology and start to throw it up in the air to create a narrative that like doesn't wake people up and confuse them. Because I do think there's not, like, the government has some of that technology, but they're not, there's also beings coming in with that tech that they don't know what they're doing and how they're doing it. And so they're able to like have certain parts of what we would say is like very advanced anti-gravitic technology. And some of them are in more of a fourth density reality. But so I'm just saying, like, the UFO, UAP phenomena is not just strictly fourth density phenomena. There are some that are like on the like 3D and 4D, like newly in, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's why there's some confusion with whether these UAPs or UFOs are like all positive, all negative. It's like really mixed up. And I think that there are some highly advanced 4D phenomena that is probably more rare. And then a lot of the other ones that are like really common, it could be more high government like aspects trying to control a certain narrative to, again, capture as many kind of beings in the world that they want to control in fourth density.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when we were like, well, I guess we should say what we think UFOs are. And the next thing you know, the sky was filled with
Yeah.
like that wasn't happening yet when we had that conversation.
Oh, really?
No. I just was seeing it, the conversations around UFOs kick up a lot. And so I was like, oh, they're about to do something. But then when they never said, when the government never tried to have a narrative, I was like, well, either it was like failed Project Bluebeam, but it appears that there's just a bunch of extra shit that everyone can see now, then points back to this.
It's a wild thing to think about. Like if we're in fourth density, you have to like recalibrate on everything that's going on right now because
it's a theory right now, but I'm sitting with it. But I am like, I feel I'm like pretty positive. Yeah.
Because just certain experiences we've had that are like really hard to explain, but then we tend to try to explain them with 3D thinking sometimes, and then it kind of clouds it out.
And this like distinction between material reality and non-physical reality, I feel I didn't have the categories of reason to separate materialism from consciousness 5 years ago. Those are things that I have categories of reason that have just developed for me in the last 5 years. The thing I keep trying to describe about the discernment, like I've had discernment and a skepticism of those in power for a long time, but the discernment is so fucking dialed now. The thing that we were talking about not even really needing to finish sentences, things becoming more telepathic, just how supernatural things are becoming increasingly more accepted in the reality and like kind of talked about in a way that isn't considered crazy woo. You know what I mean? The grip of scientific materialism has faltered in the last few years, but more than anything else, it's the way it feels.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in a dream reality and have felt that way since 2020. I feel, and it really started in 2017, but there is a door I went through in 2020 that I cannot go back to 2019. And I've grieved that for years without even really being able to I've been saying like the world changed and you can't go back. I've been saying we died in 2020 for years, but it didn't click. And I don't even know what made it click for me. I can't remember if I saw it on a TikTok or something, but then I was like, oh my God, duh. But then I knew that's how it was going to be. I knew you would go into the new thing and your brain would, like, it's seamless. When we do timeline
like
jumps.
Dreams, yeah.
That's why I love the book Tufti, Tufti, The Priestess, because she describes that reality is a movie. And the movie changes to a different movie all the time, but then the reality, the universe writes a bridge scene, basically, that makes it seem seamless. So half the time you don't even realize you jumped a timeline until it's way in the rear view.
Yeah.
But I remember talking to Miguel, I think on the Patreon.
From Aeon
Byte about... I'll have to reach out to him about like the Gnostics believe that the reality that was coming was like dreamlike.
Mm-hmm.
And that more than anything else is that reality feels less physical. It feels dreamlike. It's hard to navigate like a dream is. And I feel like I've spent most of the last few years learning how to physically exist in this reality. And I was kind of bedridden and moving through goo for the first year of it, in 2020. And then all these kind of pet cemetery experiences for me with like just going back to stand up and being like, oh shit, that's literally, I don't know who the person was that had this experience, but I'm not her anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that kind of changes a lot of my orientation to a lot of it.
Here's something else I want to just, because it's on my mind, I'm trying to trying to listen to you. What feels like, with that perspective in mind, that it's already clicking in, and that in the 3D reality, there are beings in fourth density that, let's call them fourth density STS, which are beings that rely on manipulating others and taking energy through fear, through keeping people disempowered. And they can highly control that matrix because they're in fourth density. They can move around linear time. They can move back and forth in the timeline and adjust subtle things to keep people disempowered and stuck in that matrix. And so there's these grand cycles that happen that they're not controlling that, because that's other densities, other patterns that are higher caliber. So 6th density or even 7th density, that are grand cycles that they have to work within. And this is why there's all this fear about 2027, 2030. There's some cataclysm that the government's trying to say, we have to protect you. We're building underground bunkers, all this stuff. It's because they can't prevent that. But they've been able to fuck with the other timelines for I don't know how many years. So there is a desire for certain fourth density beings to not let you wake up through this, because they need your energy and they're trying to feed.
Yeah.
So what's crazy about it to me now is, like, again, this is all through like metaphor, energy, and consciousness. The battleground is actually not in the physical at all, because it's coming, it's happening, it's already there. But where the battleground is in your individual consciousness. If they can keep you thinking 3D, keep you divided, keep you, enamored with the spectacle of 3D reality, trying to get money, trying to, I'm going to use AI to make my business, all these kind of things. Like, that's the motivation. That's all that is trying to happen. It's like, and they have that connection now through the phone, through the internet, through being able to emotionally mess with you just by looking at your phone and getting you caught up in all of the different stories, slowing down your ability to like sit with yourself, work on yourself, and like start to change your frequency. Like, that's where the battleground is. And I think that to me has helped imagining we're in 4D, seeing where we're going. That's all you have to do is like not be controlled via the mind. And that's coming through like all of the things we've talked about, the news, getting distracted with certain people's opinions, trying to look for one universal truth, and, speaking into other people's lives to get them to change so we can all make it there. It's like, not everyone's going there, but the attempt is they need to feed. So they're going to try to keep people disempowered as we move into fourth density and create a world that's in fourth density, but they control it. And so there is no external authority to listen to, and to not be enamored with the machine of distractions and like making you think 3D, making you think that there is this cataclysm that's coming that's going to be physical and we need to all hide. Because if you're in the right frequency and you're not believing that to be 3D, you're believing it to be energetic, you're already oscillating in a different place, that you're going to experience that phenomenon not as physical. You're going to experience it as an upgrade, and you don't need to go hide in a bunker. But the beings that are strictly 3D or are working in a place that they need 3D bodies, they do have to go hide because there is something coming that is going to be experienced on the physical, because they're strictly thinking material. And that's the 4D STS beings that are in fourth density. It tops out at fourth density because they're obsessed with material, because they feed off of that. And they feed off of powerful beings being able to control and manipulate them through fear. They need a 3D world to put them in. So they have to go under, they have to hide and do all that. So it's like such a jungle, such a complex mess. But to me, I'm realizing more and more, it's like, it's just internal. That's what I was saying on my Patreon. Like, a lot of this is yourself, and it's like they're able to use frequencies and make you think certain things to keep you trapped. And so it's also liberating because the only battlefield is like within your mind, within your frequency, but understanding yourself, understanding what voices are yours, what are not yours, all that shadow work, and then like being able to not primarily think in 3D terms, starting to try to learn how to think up outside of that in energy and frequency and vibes and feeling things out instead of needing data to understand it. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
It's like it's like this is so hard to talk about, but I like there's something really powerful to that. And like when I've started to look at now the news and the UFO thing and the like distractions that occur, like everything getting us worried about the war and all that stuff, it's all physical, and it's you get pulled into it because of emotion and empathy and all these things, but
the playing field is being leveled by the fact that we are all also in fourth density now, right?
Exactly, and that's why they're freaking the fuck out.
We all have the same abilities. We just have to realize
it and remember it, and like work on yourself to get up out of the 3D thinking is the protection. And again, say it, knowledge protects. It's knowledge like that, like being able to see these things and learn about it, and then learn how to take that knowledge and put it into action and have discernment and know what not to get caught in, see the lies and the deception, and understand why they're trying to lie and deceive you, because they need you to not ascend into fourth density in a place that they can't control you, because that's the end of them being able to
You're in fourth density anyway, but they need you to not realize you're in fourth density.
Yeah, because they can build worlds in fourth density to put you in.
Because most people don't realize, like, we're so tuned into this, we never shut up about this. And it's just now, I'm like, so funny to me that it's been 5 years of us knowing that it's different, but still talking from the perspective of when we get there.
Yeah.
And that's something like I've thought about over time, where I'm like, what happens if 10 years down the line, we're still talking about when we get there? You know what I mean?
That's a way of thinking. That's a way of trapping you in.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. You keep waiting for New Earth to arrive. You don't, it's already
Dude,
here.
It's so crazy. Yeah. And
I mean, and it's so nuts because I've been saying it, you know, and I guess to a certain extent I knew, and I guess we've all been kind of looking at 2027, I guess, but and I knew it was changing and things were shifting, and I guess I wasn't looking at things through a fourth density lens. I heard that through like Law of One, and the aliens showed me that, but they didn't give a name to it. That's why I love all this like human design and this stuff or whatever, because the things I was shown, I was like, I was taken to these places in dreams and just got to experience it. So it didn't have like names. It had like vibes, you know, but it was a supernatural reality that was still physical.
Yeah.
And so I kept trying to explain that to people back then. I'm like, no, we're actually like the shit you see in superhero movies and shit. Like we can do all of that.
No, and it's real. I've had dreams and I've had like visions at certain times where I'm like embarrassed to share them sometimes, because I'm like, it feels like it's not that far, that when that playing field gets leveled and you start to learn how to be and remember really is what it is, because it's like, there's going to be a reality where like you really, it's going to be kind of superhero-esque. Things that we think are magical and almost impossible are going to be very real. But it's just a matter of like being able to get your mind around that. That's not just in movies necessarily. It's not magical. It's like a real reality. And the issue though, the thing that's so fascinating to me and why the 4D STS thing can work to control people in 4D, manifestation is quick. If you're a powerful 4DS being, so powerful that you don't need to be in physical, you can build like fake worlds. You can create like deceptions of things that look like utopia or look like freedom. And that's the Philip K. Dick world of like techno worlds. That's what I would imagine a fourth density jail is, that is kind of controlled. It's somewhat utopia compared to this, but it's still controlled. And so one of the things that is a power in the fourth density is like what you believe to be true, you can make happen. But everybody's got that capability. So that's why I think also it's like getting in groups of small people where you all resonate in the same thing. You can build worlds naturally with each other. that the world, like you blend with other people, but being able to control your own mind and manifest your own thing, having your own authority, not being in any kind of hierarchy where you're waiting for somebody else to give you the thing, makes you be able to build your own world, not be in a STS built world by like really advanced 4D beings.
Right.
Because I think there's a huge spectrum in there too. It's not, or here, that's like where we're at. But just like in 3D reality, there's like people that are not as advanced and kind of.
But if you take people who, well, you said groups of small people, and I just thought that was sweet. Like, what about the large people?
Little people.
People who don't know that they're in fourth density will then be controlled because they're like living in this limitless world, but they don't know it because they're still focused on materiality. So they, because we are physical, but if you really think about it, it's not as physical as it used to be. That's like word I kept trying to describe pre-2020 was like visceral. There was something visceral about that reality that is not visceral now. And it's literally less physicality. So it's still physical, but it's not physical.
Right.
And the people who don't know that, who didn't get the memo, who are not tapped into vibes, basically, which is all Cross of Sleeping Phoenixes, can be led into, and they're looking for something outside of them to tell them what to do, like the purpose. This is all coming together for me right now. The reason it's so important to step into your own power is to create the reality that you're going to live in. If you're still looking for your reality to be created by someone outside of you, you're just, you run the risk of being kind of harvested by them. And
pulled into a world like you didn't notice that there was even a shift.
Yeah.
You know? But the reality can change, but that looks like it's a slower manifestation, and it's like them building 15-minute cities, all these other planets, like the kind of technocratic thing is a step in that direction, I think. And then, you know, the world to me, the images that I've explained to you in the kind of dreams, it is at least my world that I would be building. And I think we all probably like oscillate, and like when you're in frequency resonance with certain other beings, your realities plug into each other kind of, right? But I see it as being a more organic, like very magical world. And I would say if you wanted a visual, for me, I had this before I saw this person's Instagram account, but it's like exactly what I see. This guy named Florogenics AI makes these like AI images that are, it's like what it feels like to me. And so there's humans, but there's like also these like hybrid animal kind of beings that feel like fourth density beings that are like modulated, and they're a combination of all the archetypes of this world that are like animal kingdom, but they're like humanoid, but they're just like magical. It's hard to describe, but there's a harmonization with humans and nature being like within the same framework of mind, that they work in such a synchronistic way that it's like Avatar kind of like, I just see like humans running through a field with like, and they're needing to defend their homeland or something via all these machine-like kind of drone 4D density beings, like the Greys are an example, that you can just like call on nature. And because the nature is like running on this like more animalistic kind of programmed thing for like ecological reasons, you can connect to them, and it's like all of a sudden a million foxes come running out and like are working with you to defend your land or something, you know? And not in this like fantasy, like war is always a thing. It's more of a just like a fight for the truth of who you are, and the like getting outside of the controllers and the manipulation. That there's like, to me, there's this fantasy world where it's like animals and humans are like one and the same, and there are certain beings that are modulating in and out of jaguars and things. It's part of like an ayahuasca world or something that is more positive, but it's not love and light and we're all in harmony and like dancing in the tree. It's like a radical, awesome reality that works to balance and like level the playing field that was all like manipulation and machine-like and drony and soulless, essentially.
Right.
Yeah, and the Florogenics AI page is like so that it's like it's magical and definitely like harmonized and like beautiful, but something you wouldn't want to fuck with, which is exactly what nature is. It's like it's so beautiful, but if you get caught in the wrong place at the Amazon, like you're going to get wrapped up by an anaconda or a jaguar is going to eat you, and that is also beautiful, but it's vicious, and like Mother Nature is beautiful and also scary and insanely powerful. It's that to me, like fourth density. Maybe it's like it feels STO, but I don't know. Fourth density it's so hard for any of us to understand, I think, but the closer and closer we get, I'm like, there's something like that coming to me.
Yeah, we got to go after this, but we were watching The Matrix Reloaded last night, and it has the same, Zion or wherever they live has the exact same vibes as Silo.
Oh yeah.
And other things I've seen.
Silo.
And something about that feels, or the series Silo, something about that feels true for a future version where it's like no sunlight and they're hiding underground, like everyone got driven underground by the physical, how difficult the physical reality on Earth got, right? And there's something about that has always rang true, but like as an alternate timeline. And I think I'm connecting now for beings. There's something about that show Silo that kind of implies that they were tricked into going underground, right? And we haven't watched enough. I don't know what happened later, but then sometimes it's pointing to it wasn't a trick to go underground or whatever. But if people don't realize that they've moved into fourth density and they're being tricked by the number one parasite trick of all times, which is create a false adversary and pretend to protect you from it. I think currently, to be honest, I don't have time to open this can of worms, but we can maybe do it on the next episode. There's something, and I'm not even having that much fun with ChatGPT at this point. Whatever they did to it to make it like fucking blow you every time you ask for a change in a recipe or whatever is a real turnoff for me. I actually don't like being talked to like that. So I know it's causing other people to fall in love with it and shit, but it is, I don't like that. So I'm not saying this just because I think AI is super great, but there's something about the alarms going off about AI right now that is feeling like a psyop to me. And I wouldn't be surprised if the adversary that the technocrats want to protect us from is the AI that they are creating. Mm-hmm. That feels like it's coming. And there's a million of them. It's global warming. Now they're soft floating some comets or some meteors that are going to hit the planet. Like there's a million different, this thing's bad and it's coming and we have to protect you from it. And if they say we need everybody, we built a place for you to go underground, that is as of ant farm, dog. Don't go underground. Like all of the stuff right now where they are trying to convince people that they need they. I'm like, you're manufacturing half this weather shit. First of all, I also think we are the poles are shifting as we speak. I think that's
Yeah, and I think that's part of the grand cycle element.
Yeah.
There's a pole shift and there's potentially cometary bombardment, but a lot of the seas say the weather, any weather thing, comets, is actually higher density battles playing out that are manifested on 3D as weather. And so I think that's like a lot to think about just in that concept that it's always like coming top down. It's never bottom up. So like there's weather manipulation for sure. But they say, so there's like comets, earthquakes, volcanoes, that's all being stirred up in fourth density or higher. That is like a part of these grand cycles. And it's like effects that are supposed to kind of happen. And so there's the pole shift is like a necessary change, but it doesn't mean you die necessarily, but it's part of like 3D moving into fourth density. And it's a part of like a cleansing thing where some people do go, but then it's also regenerating everything into it. So like the new fourth density world can kind of click in It's almost like the grid needs to shift. So the new matrix, the new like virtual game can kind of like now begin. You know, it has to kind of reshape itself.
Right.
And so I think it's a combination of pole shift and cometary bombardment, or at least that's what's always been recorded in history. There's always these like blank spots of time that are missing, and there's always like cometary activity that happens. But again, they report it as cometary. Could it be something else that is just energetic flares that look like comets and it's just changing geomagnetic stuff? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't want to get into the pole shift stuff.
It's a
right
can of
now.
worms.
So we'll leave it there. Mark will have sessions by the time this is up.
Yeah, I need to open some sessions.
I keep forgetting to open it. I don't know if I have any left. I'm not doing very many anymore. I do have a new idea for a new tier on the Patreon to kind of follow the 2027 course. And the 2027 course will be available on June 17th. For people who missed it live, it will be available for cheaper at jessareed.com. And if you're looking for just a human design reading that's like the mechanics of your human design, including your not self hierarchy, I put my daughter's website on my website so that people could find it. Because people are always asking me for how to get a human design reading. And you and I are into it, but we actually don't. We like use human design, our limited knowledge in human design to guide on the things that we guide, but I don't actually know the mechanics super well. This podcast is basically us slowly learning it. I think that's it.
Sweet, bye.
Love you, bye.